Think you know your Saturday morning cartoons? Think again. Some of the most iconic cartoon characters from the 60s and 70s would never make it past a pitch meeting today. In an era when anything went, these animated icons made parents gasp, critics rage, and censors sweat. Why did millions of kids love what would spark outrage now, ready to see which beloved faces wouldn't survive in the age of rewinds, receipts, and viral outrage? Brace yourself, this list might just shatter your nostalgia. Pepe Le Pew, Looney Tunes. Let's start with a skunk whose antics would send modern networks running for the hills. Pepe Le Pew, the world's most clueless romantic, strutted onto screens with a puffed chest and a thick French accent, convinced every female cat he met was just waiting for his charm. But here's the thing, his romance was nothing short of relentless pursuit. From the 1940s all the way through the 70s, Pepe's running gag was simple: chase, grab, and refuse to take no for an answer. For decades, it was passed off as slapstick. Kids laughed, adults shrugged, and even critics mostly called him funny. But in the light of today's conversations about boundaries and respect, Pepe suddenly looks a lot less harmless. Rewatch those episodes and you'll see him pinning Penelope Pussycat to the wall, ignoring her struggles, and declaring undying love while she's frantically trying to escape. The old no means yes routine is the kind of joke that's landed entire shows in hot water. The backlash didn't stop with fan debates. When Space Jam came back in the 2020s, Pepe was quietly dropped from the lineup, with studios deciding his gag just didn't belong anymore. He's now a case study in how times and expectations change. What was once brushed off as romantic persistence now reads as completely out of line. Bottom line, Pepe's idea of love is the exact kind of controversy that gets characters written out of history, not just reruns. Speedy Gonzalez, Looney Tunes. Ready for a character who could outrun anyone and every stereotype of his era? Enter Speedy Gonzalez, the fastest mouse in all Mexico. Decked out in a giant sombrero and a grin as wide as the Rio Grande, Speedy zipped across screens in the 60s and 70s, taunting cats, rescuing his mouse pals, and shouting catchphrases that became playground legend. But here's where things get tricky. Speedy wasn't just fast, he was a lightning rod for controversy. His exaggerated accent, endless puns, and side characters, often sleepy, lazy, or depicted as bumbling, drew fire for being rooted in Mexican stereotypes. In an era before sensitivity readers and social media, this kind of humor was just part of the Saturday morning package. Fast forward to the 1990s and early 2000s, and suddenly, Speedy's cartoons were vanishing from schedules, pulled for ethnic insensitivity. The twist? Speedy's become a complicated symbol. Some Latino fans have passionately defended him, pointing out that he was the hero while the cats were the villains, and that he's one of the few early Hispanic icons in mainstream cartoons. But studios remain cautious, often airing his old shorts with disclaimers or keeping them under wraps. The verdict: Speedy Gonzalez is the kind of cartoon character who triggers debates about representation, pride, and where the line between homage and stereotype really lies. One thing's certain, his legacy is faster, messier, and a lot more complicated than a simple arriba arriba. The Slag Brothers, Wacky Races. If you ever watched Wacky Races, you'll remember a wild duo bashing their way down the track in a car made of rocks. Meet the Slag Brothers, rock and gravel, caveman racers who seem to have rolled out of a prehistoric cartoon fever dream. Unibrows, club swinging, and barely a word of understandable dialogue. These two were played strictly for laughs. But behind the gags, there's a reason why they wouldn't stand a chance on modern TV. Back then, caveman humor was shorthand for anything goes. The Slag Brothers gags relied on wild-eyed expressions, clubbing each other on the head, and a kind of bumbling violence that drew more inspiration from old vaudeville than real Stone Age history. But today, their entire act would get flagged for mocking people with disabilities or neurological conditions. The joke wasn't just that they were old-fashioned, it was that they were dumb, savage, and incapable of real speech. Modern shows steer far clear of this kind of slapstick that uses stereotypes about intelligence or ability as a punchline. There's more. The brothers' endless fighting and primitive antics look less like lighthearted fun now and more like mean-spirited mockery. Critics argue that it reinforces old, harmful ideas about uncivilized people, even if they're just cartoon characters. What's left is a pair of characters so out of sync with current values that they're basically fossils themselves, a reminder that what used to be harmless fun can age into controversy fast. Fogghorn Legghorn, Looney Tunes. Now let's talk about a rooster who practically invented loud and proud. Fogghorn Legghorn stormed onto the scene in a cloud of southern drawl, bigger-than-life bravado, and non-stop zingers. He called everyone boy, bossed around his barnyard rivals, and usually ended each episode with a thumping, a pratfall, or a joke at someone's expense. Foghorn's whole shtick was being the loudest, brashest character in the room, a walking stereotype of Southern good old boys. He dished out discipline, sometimes with a paddle or a well-timed slap, like it was all part of the show. Back in the 60s and 70s, it was all just farmyard fun. Today, those heavy-handed punishments, constant name-calling, and overblown accent get a very different reaction. Critics call out the casual use of regional stereotypes, the glorification of bullying, and the way Foghorn puts down anyone who isn't as big and brassy as he is. Modern TV networks are ultra-cautious about making fun of any group, even in cartoons, so a character who dishes out insults and hits as punchlines is more likely to get edited, muted, or pulled entirely. Even reruns of his cartoons have had lines cut or entire scenes dropped. The result? Fogghorn Legghorn has gone from barnyard king to controversial relic, a symbol of how quickly the rules for funny change when the world starts watching closer. Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids. Before the term body positivity even existed, there was Fat Albert. He lumbered onto TV with a deep laugh and a catchphrase that became a cultural touchstone. Created by Bill Cosby, Fat Albert and his friends were meant to reflect real inner-city kids, flaws, struggles, and all. The show broke ground with its diversity, honesty, and positive messages. But there's a catch. Let's talk about those names. Dumb Donald, Weird Harold, Mushmouth. The series built its laughs on good intentions, but used nicknames and jokes that would be red flags today. Modern audiences are quick to call out shows that single out kids for how they look, sound, or learn. Jokes about weight or intelligence, especially when aimed at kids, are strictly off-limits in today's cartoons. Even though Fat Albert tried to deliver lessons about friendship and acceptance, the humor too often punched down. It's a paradox. The show was celebrated for giving black kids heroes who looked like them, but it also got away with making those same heroes the butt of jokes no one would write now. Reruns of Fat Albert are rare, and new viewers are often shocked by the language and casual mockery. If he pitched that show in a modern studio, Fat Albert wouldn't even get past the first focus group. What was once groundbreaking is now just as controversial as anything it set out to challenge. Tom and Jerry, Mammy Two Shoes. You know Tom and Jerry, the cat-and-mouse duo who made chaos look like an Olympic sport. But behind the slapstick, there was a character that modern TV execs would cut faster than a commercial break, Mammy Two Shoes. This housemaid, always shown from the knees down, became a fixture in early episodes. Her thick accent, scolding tone, and constant broom waving used as punchlines for decades. At the time, most viewers didn't blink. Mammy was just the lady who yelled at Tom. But look a little closer, and you'll see the roots of a much bigger problem. Mammy Two Shoes was drawn straight from old racial stereotypes, right down to her voice and mannerisms. The episodes treated her like a faceless authority figure, but she represented a harmful caricature seen throughout American entertainment in that era. Fast forward to now, and you'll find Tom and Jerry reruns with Mammy Two Shoes edited out, replaced with new characters, or completely redubbed with different voices. Critics and audiences alike called out her portrayal for being outdated and offensive, and networks moved quickly to scrub the character from history. What was once seen as just a cartoon is now an uncomfortable reminder of how blind early TV was to real harm. If Tom and Jerry debuted today, you can bet there'd be a totally different cast keeping that house in order. Hong Kong Fooey. Meet Penry, the mild-mannered janitor who becomes the one and only Hong Kong Fooey, martial arts superhero by day, bumbling dog by night. Voiced by the legendary Scatman Crothers, this 1974 Hanna-Barbera creation karate-chopped his way through crooks, clichés, and just about every Asian stereotype you can think of. With gongs crashing, wise old sayings, and wild chop-socky gags, the show went all in on a kung fu craze that was sweeping America. The setup was simple. Penry finds trouble, changes into his superhero robe, and then fumbles his way through crime fighting, with moves borrowed from a mishmash of movies. His assistant, Spot the Cat, did all the real thinking, while Hong Kong Fooey got the glory. The joke? He's clueless, but everyone thinks he's a genius because he looks the part. In the 70s, nobody thought twice. But fast forward, and the show's take on Asian culture looks more like a parody gone wrong. From phony accents to paper-thin wisdom, every episode leans into tired gags that would set social media on fire now. Even with its catchy theme and slapstick action, Hong Kong Fooey is a poster dog for how pop culture can cross the line from homage to mockery. Today, he'd be cancelled faster than you can say #1 super guy. Quick Draw McGraw El Kabong. Imagine a cartoon horse with a cowboy hat and a guitar, smashing bad guys over the head and calling it justice. Welcome to the world of Quick Draw McGraw, who sometimes traded his sheriff's badge for a mask and a new name, El Kabong. This heroic alter ego delivered slapstick justice with a Spanish accent so fake it'd make a telenovela villain blush. El Kabong wasn't just about the gags. He was a whirlwind of south-of-the-border jokes, bad puns, and wild guitar-swinging mayhem. The act was played for laughs, but the Spanish accent, mixed-up phrases, and endless ole catchphrases drew straight from a Hollywood grab bag of stereotypes. The message? Funny accents or instant comedy. For years, nobody questioned it. Kids laughed, parents shrugged, and the show rolled on. In the 21st century, the mood shifted. Suddenly, the idea of a cowboy horse pretending to be a masked Mexican vigilante, complete with caricatured voice and mannerisms, doesn't look so harmless. Studios are now much more careful about ethnic humor, especially when the punchline is about the other. El Kabong's brand of comedy is now more likely to draw criticism than laughs. What used to be a light-hearted spoof is now a glaring example of how fast the rules of funny can change. Yoseity Sam, Looney Tunes. Yosemite Sam was the wildest, angriest, and most gun-happy outlaw in cartoon history. If there was a way to blow something up, shoot it, or chase someone with a stick of dynamite, Sam was first in line. He was always shouting, always firing pistols, and always coming up short against Bugs Bunny, usually with his mustache smoking and his hat blown off. In the 60s and 70s, Sam was the gold standard for cartoon chaos. His whole shtick was violence dialed up to 11, and audiences loved it. But now, the idea of a cartoon character firing guns at everything that moves, losing his temper every 2 seconds, and resolving every problem with a stick of TNT just doesn't fly. After a wave of debates about cartoon violence, especially on shows aimed at kids, networks started making edits. Gunshots were removed. Scenes were cut. Sam's pistols were sometimes erased completely. And it wasn't just the violence. Sam's angry little man routine played up all the worst cowboy cliches, from rootin'-tootin' slang to wild, angry tirades. He was the kind of character who became a lightning rod for criticism as soon as anyone started paying attention to what exactly kids were watching. These days he's more likely to be seen in nostalgia compilations than in regular reruns. Yosemite Sam is a perfect storm of everything modern TV censors love to hate: loud, dangerous, and totally unfiltered. The Antill Mob wacky races. Gangsters, goofballs, and comic crooks, the Antill Mob were a pint-sized parody of 1930s mobsters, transplanted into a cartoon world where their main job was to crash cars, kidnap Penelope Pitstop, and crack wise in fake gangster accents. They wore trench coats, fedoras, and always had a heist up their sleeves. For kids in the 60s and 70s, they were just another batch of wacky racers, always scheming and always failing. But today, the whole gang would get a hard pass from censors. The Antill Mob's act was built around crime as a joke, constant car chases, kidnapping attempts, and slapstick shootouts. Even worse, their tough guy act was a bundle of stereotypes: fast-talking, dim-witted, and always one step behind the action. The humor was rooted in caricatures of real-life criminals, all dialed up for laughs. Now networks are on high alert about glamorizing crime, even in cartoons. Shows that treat kidnapping, threats, and criminal schemes as fun would never pass the modern test. The Antill Mob's style of comedy is so dated, it's almost quaint. But under the nostalgia, you find a crew that's a walking and driving reminder of how quickly entertainment can go from mainstream to what were they thinking? Their hijinks were wild, but today, the only thing racing is the race to keep them off the air. Snagglepuss. Exit stage left. If there was ever a cartoon character who made flamboyant charm an art form, it was Snagglepuss. The pink lion pranced through Hanna-Barbera's lineup, tossing out lines in his theatrical, campy style. Audiences in the 60s and 70s didn't blink. Snagglepuss was just the fancy one, a harmless, joke-a-minute character known for turning everyday disasters into over-the-top melodrama. But look through today's lens, and suddenly the script looks a lot less innocent. Back then, nobody on TV ever said the word gay, but Snagglepuss's mannerisms, his dramatic flourishes, high-pitched voice, and endless string of theater references were wink-wink stereotypes baked into the punchlines. Decades later, the character has become a case study in coded comedy, where funny came at the expense of anyone seen as different. Modern audiences, especially LGBTQ+ viewers, are split. Some embrace Snagglepuss as a camp icon, others call out the lazy one-note jokes. Modern cartoon creators would never build a character around mannerisms meant to mock or out anyone. And studios, aiming for authentic representation, have all but retired this kind of nudge-and-wink humor. Snagglepuss's legacy is complicated, an early attempt at diversity or a product of the times. Either way, it's a reminder that what once slid under the radar can hit controversy head-on the moment culture catches up. Betty Boop. She may have been born in the Roaring '20s, but Betty Boop made a serious comeback in the '60s and '70s, with reruns, toys, and even new episodes reintroducing her to a whole new generation. Betty was the original animated it girl, flirty, bold, and always one step ahead of her bumbling co-stars. Back then, parents shrugged, kids watched, and most thought of her as just a funny, feisty cartoon. But here's the catch. Her original episodes were loaded with jokes and imagery you'd never see on Saturday morning TV today. Betty Boop's signature look, big eyes, high-pitched voice, and endless parade of revealing outfits wasn't just about being cute. The original stories leaned on her as a baby vamp, often placing her in situations and jokes that were way too mature for kids. Plus, her early cartoons included racial stereotypes and gags that modern audiences would call out in a heartbeat. By the 70s, most of those old episodes were chopped, censored, or buried completely. Modern networks would never approve a character who built her brand on a combination of flirty jokes and outdated gags. Betty Boop survives now as a pop culture symbol, but her full cartoon history is something you're more likely to find in film school than on TV. The lesson? Even the most iconic faces have a controversial side waiting just below the surface. Peter Potmus. Let's talk about a purple hippopotamus who spent the 60s globe-trotting in a time-traveling balloon. Peter Potmus was the star of his own Hanna-Barbera show, famous for his hippo hurricane holler and a string of offbeat adventures. On the surface, it was harmless, zany fun, a friendly hippo helping out wherever he landed. But the show's travels took him everywhere, and not always in the best direction. Many episodes leaned into jungle adventure tropes, with Peter and his monkey sidekick, So-So, meeting all sorts of native characters, often shown with grass skirts, exaggerated speech, and savage antics. These caricatures were meant to be funny, but modern eyes see them as cringeworthy and offensive. The jokes played up stereotypes that don't belong on TV anymore, especially in cartoons aimed at kids. Networks today are on high alert for anything that plays into old-fashioned or harmful depictions, and Peter Potmus's globe-hopping, stereotype-laden adventures would get rewritten or canned before they hit the air. What once seemed like innocent fantasy now reads like a textbook example of why diversity consultants exist. Peter may still float around as a vintage icon, but don't expect to see those old adventures airing anytime soon. Witch Hazel, Looney Tunes. If you've ever watched a Looney Tunes Halloween special, you've seen Witch Hazel, the cackling, wild-haired witch who made every spell an excuse for a laugh. She zoomed across the sky on a broom, tossed out puns, and always seemed to lose her false teeth at the wrong moment. Back in the day, Witch Hazel was just another wild character in a universe of oddballs. But look at her now, and the spell is broken. Hazel's whole shtick was rooted in ugly woman jokes, with her crooked nose, scraggly hair, and exaggerated features played strictly for laughs. Every episode dialed up the visual gags, with the punchline almost always revolving around her looks or how unladylike she was. These days, body shaming and mean-spirited humor about appearance are big red flags, especially when targeted at women. Modern TV writers are a lot more careful about what kind of jokes they use, and Hazel's routines have quietly vanished from reruns and reboots. Audiences expect more than recycled stereotypes and easy targets. Witch Hazel's legacy isn't just a haunted laugh track, it's a reminder that sometimes the scariest thing in an old cartoon isn't the witch, but the way the world used to laugh. Top Cat. Who doesn't love a good underdog, or in this case, an undercat? Top Cat was the ultimate alleyway schemer, leading a gang of streetwise cats through a world of get-rich-quick schemes, run-ins with Officer Dibble, and non-stop mischief. Kids loved him, adults loved him, and for years, his adventures were a cartoon staple. But what made Top Cat a hero back then would make him a target for controversy now. Top Cat's brand of comedy was all about outsmarting authority, bending the rules, and treating crime as just another day at the office. The cats scammed, conned, and ran circles around the law, always with a wink and a smile. In the 60s, it was clever, slapstick fun. But now, with networks wary of glamorizing rule-breaking and painting law enforcement as clueless or corrupt, Top Cat's antics would draw more than a few complaint emails. Add in some gags about class, money, and making it big by any means necessary, and you've got a recipe for trouble in the modern world. What once made Top Cat a legend now makes him a relic of a time when the lines between right and wrong were drawn in pencil, not ink. His adventures are still fun to revisit, but you won't see new episodes with those same old tricks anytime soon. How many classic cartoon faces just made you think, wait, that was actually controversial? These wild, boundary-pushing characters changed TV, and not always for the better. Which one shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments, hit subscribe for more behind-the-scenes stories, and keep the debate rolling. Animation history is full of surprises, and we're only scratching the surface.